Well, hello and welcome to Musings of a Texas Preacher Man. I'm Scott Fisher and I'm glad you've chosen to study with me today. Today is the relaunch of our broadcast following the move to Tennessee. And even though I live in Tennessee now, I'm still a Texas preacher man. Born in Texas, and I've lived most of my life in Texas. We're going to launch into a new study of the New Covenant and what it means for you and me today. First of all, our Bible is divided into the Old Testament and the New Testament, or another way of saying it is the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. Much of our New Testament originates in the Old Testament. Unfortunately, over the years, many Christians have embraced the idea that the Old Testament is unimportant and unnecessary for New Testament Christians, and so it's been largely ignored. Yet, the text of the Old Testament was the source material for Jesus and the writers of the New Testament. In fact, the apostles of Jesus preached the gospel from the Old Testament texts, and their writings are filled with direct quotes and indirect references to the Old Testament text. In fact, the apostle Paul, in his trial before King Agrippa, said that he preached nothing but what the prophets and Moses said was going to take place. Peter said that the Old Testament prophets who, quote, prophesied of the grace that would come to you, and the you being the first century audience that Peter was writing to, knew that they were not serving themselves, but you. The Old Testament prophets wrote over 500 years prior to the coming of Jesus, and yet, according to Peter, it had been revealed to them that what they were writing about was in the distant future. According to Peter, was directed to that first century audience that had been eyewitnesses to the coming of Jesus, his crucifixion and resurrection. Following Jesus' resurrection and his encounter with the disciples on the Emmaus Road, he said to them, "O foolish men and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken." Luke 24, verse 25. And in verse 27, it continues, "Then beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, he explained to them the things concerning himself in all the scriptures." Now here's a major dilemma. If the Old Testament is the primary source material for the New Testament, and most contemporary Christians are unfamiliar with the text of the Old Testament, where does that leave us? My good friend Don K. Preston has written many books that has had a huge influence in shaping my understanding of scriptures over the past few years. In his book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings, he addresses this issue. Quote, "The problem with most modern readings of biblical texts, however, is that a lot of Bible students do not want to go to the trouble of unpacking the Hebraic expressions and thought. In fact, in-depth study of the Old Testament is even discouraged in some circles, if not overtly, then no doubt subtly." And then he quotes a comment by Robert Brinsmead from Brinsmead's book, The Pattern of Redemptive History. Here's the quote. "For various reasons, we Christians have neglected or discarded the art of preaching Christ out of the Old Testament as the apostles did. Marcion, the great heretic of the 2nd century, wanted to discard the Old Testament entirely. Although the church rejected Marcion, the Marcionian tendency has persisted. The church has not always been comfortable with the Old Testament. Christians often have not known what to do with it, and to the extent that we've neglected the God-given framework of the gospel, we've had to invent frameworks of our own. And that is exactly what has happened. The Old Covenant, also called the Mosaic Covenant, is established between God and the nation of Israel, the blood descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And included in that covenant was the rite of circumcision, ceremonial washings, animal sacrifices, the observance of dietary laws, Sabbath days and feast days, and other rules and regulations. And what we learn from the Old Testament is that a day in their future was coming and would bring about Messiah and his messianic kingdom, a new covenant. It's specifically articulated in Jeremiah and Ezekiel and is alluded to in the rest of the prophets. In Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 to 33, he writes, quote, "Behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not like the covenant which I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. But this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and on their heart I'll write it, and I'll be their God, and they will be my people. Now, the language that's used to describe this new covenant that would come about in their distant future was messianic in nature and finds its fulfillment in Jesus. The language used to describe the coming new covenant is metaphorical. It uses flowery language of blessing in contrast to the language of cursing that was part of the old covenant. The new covenant is presented as life, while the old covenant is presented as death. The new covenant is springs of living water, while the old covenant is a desolate wilderness. The new covenant is presented as filled with joy, while the old covenant is portrayed as despair. The new covenant is presented as peace, while the old covenant is portrayed as chaos. The new covenant is presented as light, while the old covenant is presented as darkness. Here's perhaps the most significant distinction. The new covenant is presented as a spiritual kingdom that is open to all people everywhere, regardless of race, sex, or economic status. It's not geographically located. It's not militaristic. Its temple is not made with human hands. It's centered in the presence of God among his people. The old covenant was literal, physical, ethnocentric, geocentric, militaristic, and theocratic. As the Lord said in Jeremiah, days are coming when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers. This new covenant was going to be different in every way. It would be a better covenant with better promises based on better blood, not through the blood of goats and calves, but through the blood of Christ. Well, we'll continue unpacking this new covenant right here tomorrow in the days to come. I hope you'll continue with me on Musings of a Texas Preacher Man. I post a teaching 4 times each week on Monday through Thursday. I'll post a link on Facebook and Twitter, and if you click the subscribe button in the lower right corner of your screen, you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. If you like these videos, I hope you'll click the like button and even share it with your friends on social media. Remember, let Scripture interpret Scripture. Well, I hope you'll go out and make today a great day. Be safe, be blessed, and I'll look forward to seeing you right here again tomorrow morning.